Into the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, joined by our producer, Adam Studzinski. Today, David Haugh is off in Las Vegas doing Las Vegas things. The Bears are heading for their preseason finale on Saturday at Soldier Field. Studs, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Good to be here and fill in for Vegas Haugh, as they're calling him, for the 2 days they're out in Las Vegas. So it sounds like they're having a good time out there.
The preliminary word was, David did the morning show on, I guess it would have been Wednesday, and then stayed up until like beyond midnight Vegas time. So that had to be like a 24-hour straight stretch for David doing the Vegas thing.
I don't know how he did it, man. Like, that sounds like, a really impressive stretch, because I think he was saying, like, every time he tried to take a nap, something kept coming up. So he made it. And he was there starting the afternoon show. So he's good to go.
Well, hopefully at some point he'll be able to get some rest. He'll be able to get himself locked and loaded for the regular season, because we've got a action-packed regular season ahead, and we've got a preseason to finish first. And that's going to happen Saturday at Soldier Field with the Buffalo Bills coming to town. Earlier Thursday, it was announced that the Buffalo Bills would be playing their starters to start that game on Saturday at Soldier Field. On Thursday afternoon, Matt Eberflus made it clear that he was going to be playing his healthy starters some on Saturday afternoon. It's whoever else can be healthy on offense. It's whoever can be healthy on defense. So in terms of a 22 starter appearance, I think we're probably waiting until September for that. But at least we get one more look at the starting quarterback and the guys he's got around him. What was your initial reaction to getting that news?
So I think that it's great that at the very least Justin Fields is going to be playing. I think there's a little concern. I know we'll get into it a little bit about him playing behind what's going to be maybe two of the starting offensive linemen. And we're not, right. I guess we'll see on Saturday, because they're being pretty low key about injuries still. But I think it's good that the starters are going to be playing. Like, I understood the reason why they didn't play in the second preseason game against the Colts. Like, I got their reasoning. And I think that we all, just specifically on Justin Fields, we all need to see him, I think, just for our own sanity, see more of him and not say, okay, he only got, 7 total plays in the first preseason game. And offense looks great, but he didn't have to do much. So it's like, let's get him out there and have hhim throw downfield a little bit more. And hopefully whatever is remaining of their offensive line is able to hold up. I know that, Cole Kmet is back, so at least they'll have him back, supposedly. And also, even defensively, getting some of the starters out there, and seeing Jalen Johnson again. Tyreek Stevenson probably would have played regardless, but I think it's good that the starters are going to be out there and playing. It would have been weird if they weren't, considering the Bills starters are. And I don't think either team, I know that Eberflus talked about this, like the idea of, do you guys communicate about that? He said that in this case they didn't, but it would be weird for one team to have their starters and the other team to not.
Well, and certainly if you're going to take that risk, you're going to want to have it done for a purpose, and getting some of those full speed, full contact game reps in live action against another established defense is a way to just kind of measure your progress, give you an idea of what you need to work on heading into the regular season, and just give your guys who are healthy enough to play a little bit of that acclimation that they won't then have to sift through on September 10th when the Packers come to town. There's a couple things that I think about when this decision is made. Number one, I just think that for where this offense is, for where this quarterback is, just getting every little experience to matter is a big deal. And so this is an opportunity Saturday to get, whether it's 15 snaps, whether it's 2 drives, 3 drives, whether they play all the way to halftime, we'll see. But I think that experience matters. You pointed it out. Justin played 7 snaps against the Titans. He threw 3 passes all behind the line of scrimmage. We want to see what it looks like from within the pocket. We want to see the processing speed. We want to see how quickly he's making decisions. And you'll get a little bit of a snapshot of that on Saturday. 2019 always comes to my head because the Bears didn't play anyone notably during the regular season. And even as they were doing that, I remember having conversations with Rich Campbell about the scope of their opener. Now, look, 2019 was a different animal. It was the NFL's 100th season. The Bears were Super Bowl hopefuls at that point, legitimately, and they were getting ready to play a primetime game that was the, curtain up game for the entire league. So there's a totally different stage there. And so in 2019, you kind of said to yourself, man, like, This isn't opening on a Sunday afternoon against the Arizona Cardinals. This is the stage, and if you lay an egg on the stage, that could have a dangerous ripple effect for the confidence, for the way you're perceived, for the pressure that was inside the building. And I think that kind of bared itself out. The Bears were terrible that night offensively, lost that game 10-3. One of the weirdest parts of that season was that they came back and won their next 3 games, and they were 3-1 before eventually it all unraveled again. But I do think that there was kind of a intense letdown with the buildup to that game and then what it was performance-wise that they never truly got past. So I bring that up because the Bears are opening again this year against the Green Bay Packers. It's not the Thursday night NFL league opener. It's not even a primetime game, but it is a 325, bigger stage game that a lot of people will be watching to see where you're at. And so I do think it is beneficial to go into that game with some form of momentum, with a little bit more experience, and not have had your only live game experience have been a month prior in a 7-snap cameo against the Titans.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad you brought up that 2019 season. As much as I don't like to think about it as a fan all that much because of the disaster it ended up being, I remember when they said that year, or going into the preseason, when Matt Nagy said that they're not going to play the starters in the preseason, I remember thinking, and they did the same thing in 2018 too, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure they did the same thing in 2018.
I can't recall what that lead up was. That was Matt's first year, and I don't remember what the preseason log was.
So it's irrelevant to I was just trying to remember it on the top of my head, but I remember at the time saying I'm cool with this because what's the preseason really matter? And then in retrospect, learning like, oh, okay, these games really do mean something for especially a young quarterback to play in. And especially when as you were saying, when you're playing a division opponent to kick things off, like we don't want them. Nobody wants them to come out and lay an egg against the Packers. Again, they've lost, I think it's 8 games in a row to the Packers. They've got to be ready. And the Packers defense, they underperformed a little bit last year, but they've got some real players out there. You have to get Justin Fields, especially out there against what is, an actual real defense in the Buffalo Bills, who at least will have their starters out there for a few series, and get him that kind of rep. And like you said, if he went in there to that game against the Packers with just those 7 snaps where he didn't really have to do anything in the first preseason game, I think that we would all be worried about how they would look, even if it's just the knee-jerk response from what happened in 2019.
No, there's no question. And so it'll be interesting to see how long they decide to play the starters. Matt Eberflus said that meeting would be occurring later on Thursday afternoon into the evening as they kind of formulate the snap count range that they want for the guys that they are going to play. We talked about the offensive line. We know Tevin Jenkins isn't going to play. He's probably going to be out into October, if not longer. We can assume that Darnell Wright is not going to play. He injured his ankle earlier this week and has missed the last 2 practices. I think it would be easy to say that they're going to err on the side of caution there. Cody Whitehair has been dealing with a hand issue. I think he will be ready to go on Saturday. You've got Braxton Jones, who's clearly now the Iron Man of this offensive line, who doesn't miss time. I'm knocking on wood over here because clearly he has found a formula that no one else in that room has been able to find over the last 2 years. And so now you're mixing and matching pieces. And so Nate Davis is the other guy who's like, availability is so hard to figure out at this point. He's been in and out of training camp for the past month, mostly out. And you would love for him to get some game speed action with Justin Fields behind him before you get to the starting game. But some of this is now, okay, as you mentioned at the start, what does this offensive line look like? How much can you trust it? And how long are you willing to trust it to hold up on a Saturday in August, knowing what's at stake if something, catastrophic were to happen behind it?
Right. And I wish that we could answer more of that right here and now before the game, but because they're so unwilling to talk about injuries at this time of year, I have no idea. I like to think that Nate Davis is going to play just because maybe they pushed him onto the field and because he has been off and on, like you were saying, at practice, the last week or so. But like, you got to get him out there. And if anything, you got to say to Nate Davis, like, if you're healthy enough, you got to go because we need you to protect the quarterback.
Right.
right?
Right, and we paid you in March, and we gave you a deal, and it's go time now, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is go time right now. I always refer to Monday as the start of week 0, and
Mhm.
when you hit week 0, you better start accelerating down that on ramp. This isn't like break, break, break. No, let's go. It's time to get moving, and I think this is kind of a precursor to that.
And yeah, and I think that hopefully Nate Davis at the least is out there. And in that case, at least you have 3 of your 5 starting linemen out there. And I know that Eberflus was saying that by the start of the regular season, like if this, I kind of am getting the feeling with Darnell Wright, like if this was a regular season game, he'd probably be out there by Sunday, right? So I'm not that worried about his availability. It'd be nice to get a rookie like him
Yeah, a little more time,
more
yeah.
reps. But like I get it, you're not going to risk it at this point. So at the very least, like maybe we get 3 of the 5 starting linemen. I hope it's more than 2. Like you said, we're confident that Whitehair and Braxton Jones are going to be out there. Would make, I think, everyone feel a lot more comfortable if Justin has 3 of his 5 starting linemen out there instead of just 2. And I guess like I said, well, it just remains to be seen. So we'll all find out together.
Yeah, so Chase Claypool remains out with his hamstring issue. Velus Jones Jr. still not practicing. Dante Pettis has been out since the game against the Colts on Saturday. The receiving core banged up as well, and so now you're kind of playing that mix and match game as well. 2 pieces of good news from the week: Cole Kmet, who left Wednesday's practice on a cart, but not with any sort of leg injury, seemed to have suffered something from the neck up, was back at practice, fully cleared, fully participating, and Matt Eberflus said he's all squared away, so there's nothing to worry about there. That's a huge sigh of relief, obviously, for this offense. And then Tremaine Edmonds, the prize free agent signing on the defense in March, has been back on the practice field the last couple days, still ramping up, still going through some of the individual periods and trying to get himself back toward 11-on-11 work. I would doubt we see him on Saturday, but who knows? Maybe they turn him loose for a few snaps just so he can get some of that game speed. But that's certainly good news with 2 of their core starters having positive news on the health front.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially the Cole Kmet one. When I know that I was texting you on Wednesday, I'm like, what is going on here? And so that's great that Cole Kmet was back out. And I was less worried when I heard the circumstances of how he left. Like he walked to the cart and then the cart took him to the facility. Right. Because the first thing I heard was he got carted off. I was like, oh geez. So, but that's great that he's gonna be back. Especially, after he signs that contract, I know that he's going to want to be out there. It'd be good to see Tremaine Edmonds out there just so we all can see. I mean, he's one of the biggest free agent additions that they made, and we all made talked a lot about their investment in this line in the off-ball linebackers. Tremaine Edmonds being the first one or the biggest of them. So I would like to see him, but he's not a guy that I'm worried about if he doesn't get the reps because he's got plenty of high-level experience. Like he's one of those veterans that if he was healthy all preseason and they didn't play him, I would get it, even though I know that linebackers usually do play. But I would get it, So if he is even just like remotely not 100%, like I would get if they hold him back.
Yeah, the value obviously is for the guy that's going to be wearing the green dot and handling the signals for the defense. You want to just kind of create some communication smoothness as you get toward the regular season. The Bears will be without most likely Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker on Saturday. They will be without DeMarcus Walker, whose injury situation is another one worth scratching your head about. I know you've kind of taken note that DeMarcus Walker and Nate Davis, both free agent signings from Tennessee. Maybe Mike Vrabel knew what he was doing when he said, good luck elsewhere if these 2 guys can't get on the practice field regularly.
That's just weird, right? And maybe it has nothing to do with each other. And I've heard like various things about what these guys could be dealing with. So, but it's just weird. 2 former Titans not seeming to be on the practice field a lot, and that could just be coincidence. But it's something we noted during the show today on the score. It was these 2 former Titans. It's they don't like to practice. So I think we're all confident they're fine for week 1, right? But you would like to see more of them. No doubt.
I think the best news we have here is that the calendar will flip to September next week, and in September, there's just less wiggle room when you're trying to interpret all these things. August can be how much of a deal do we make out of X, Y, or Z, and September is this is the real deal here, and you better be on the field for practice. You better be on the field for games. You better be producing on games because there's nowhere to hide, because the results are what define your entire season. That's truly going to be the case for the quarterbacks on this team, specifically Justin Fields. This was another good week to take some inventory on his progress. I think there are two conversations with Justin Fields right now. There's the one that's being had as essentially a shouting match in the public forum on whether he is, a possible MVP or a guy who may not have a job as a starter at Hallis Hall a year from now. And then there's the one internal that's truly micro focused and day to day and grounded in the what do we do today to push forward. And so we were able to talk to Andrew Janocko, the quarterback's coach this week. We were able to get another update from Luke Getsy. And I think what you kind of zoom out and see when you see the big picture with Justin is that comparatively to last year at this time, his knowledge of this offense is miles ahead of where it was. His understanding of what he's seeing from opposing defenses is miles ahead of where it was a year ago. And now it's all about how do we apply this in year two with some of these new pieces around you? How do we understand what the coaching staff is asking of you specifically? And how do we turn that into efficiency and production in NFL games when the lights go on in a couple of weeks? That's truly going to be an interesting thing to watch. One of the questions I asked Luke Getsy on Wednesday was when September 10th arrives, there's obviously going to be an eye test for everybody that is in a coaching booth or on the sideline for the Bears to try to figure out whether the progress they think that Justin has made since the spring and through the summer is where it is or if it's not. And so the question to Luke was essentially, what are you going to be looking for? What is going to tell you about where Justin is at when you get your first regular season game? Here was his answer.
There's not one thing in particular. I think playing the position, it's important that you're in control, right? And what that means is you're taking care of the football, right? You're not getting surprised by anything. And if you do, then how do you respond to those things that did surprise you? And if you're able to respond in the way that, not necessarily wins the games for you, but doesn't lose the games for you, you've prepared somebody for that opportunity. And then as the season goes, and it's just like we talk about in here, he's got to get better each and every day. He's got to get better each and every game. Everybody on our team does. And so we can see that growth will be good.
So Studs, this was, just kind of some refreshing insight from the offensive coordinator, the guy who is overseeing Justin's development to this point. And it's a reminder that he is still a young developing quarterback climbing the ladder, trying to get himself to that position where eventually he, hopefully, if all stars align, becomes the guy that is the engine of all the success you ever have. And he's what those star quarterbacks in this league are, which is, again, the engine that propels everything. Right now, you hear in the offensive coordinator's voice just a little bit of caution of, okay, here are some of the just basic steps we're trying to take so that eventually maybe those steps can turn into a leap.
Oh yeah. And that's and I know we'll get into the kind of MVP hyperbole in a few minutes here, but like I think that some of the Justin Fields expectations and talk have gotten so out of control this offseason that what Getsy's saying, it's good to hear that at least in a Hallis Hall, and I've gathered this through most of the offseason too, is their expectations seem much more grounded than outside of Hallis Hall. Like they know that it's still a stepping stone for Justin Fields. He still needs to be able to be a consistently above or even average passer. Right. And so like what he's saying there in that clip we just played, like, don't lose us games. There was a couple times last year where he threw, like the Falcons game. And I know there was a lot of talk that went into that last drive where what he ended up throwing a pick on an overthrown ball to David Montgomery that ended the game. Right. So stuff like that, like basic things like that, eliminate those. And I know there was some debate about the interception against the Packers that ended the game where, did Equinemi St. Brown need to run that route harder? Whatever. The pick went on Justin Fields' record, and that pick ended the game for the most part. So little things like that, like don't throw picks in the fourth quarter when we're trying to go down and win the game. Like, that is the kind of stepping stone that you're looking for. And then we can get to the MVP talk if he takes the step as an NFL passer first.
The Lions game at Soldier Field, another example that was earlier in the fourth quarter, but it was still significant where you throw a screen pass and it's a pick six, and then you do bounce back from that and you break off a big touchdown run that makes up for it. But the key is to have that big touchdown run not be making up for an error. It's to have it be the play that wins you the game, and then you don't have to look back after that. So it is a reminder, and I think it is going to be really, really fun, I guess, overall to watch everything unfold in the month of September. There's going to be a great test here for this team, and they're going to get a lot of reps and a lot of action to figure out where this whole thing heads.
Right. And I think that I hope that Bears fans out there, specifically the ones that are so hyped up about him, can reel their expectations in just a little bit. It's not going to look great. I mean, look, if he comes out and he's on fire from the start of the season, that's great. But the expectations for him have to be less than MVP talk and more than what it was last year. It's somewhere in there, a step forward between this wide ranging area. It's got to be somewhere in there. And that's what you have to be looking for. You can't be talking about like if you're making a legitimate bet on him to be MVP this year, I hope it'd be great if you don't throw away your money, but it's not the time to do that. It's just it's the same kind of thing when there was Mitchell Trubisky MVP talk before 2019. That got so out of control. And it's just what are we doing here?
Yeah, and I'll get back to some of that in a couple minutes. And obviously there is a depth chart here at the position that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And Saturday's another opportunity to lock in on what has become, one of the city's biggest fascination points right now in August with this team. And it's who's going to be the backup quarterback. There's a open competition in Matt Eberflus's words between PJ Walker and Tyson Bagent, and maybe even perhaps Nathan Peterman. And there's an opportunity here for both of those guys to state a case on Saturday for why they deserve that role. Bagent obviously is coming off the performance in Indy where he leads the 17-play, 92-yard touchdown drive and gives a lot of people a license to dream, to think that maybe they've got a little diamond in the rough from Little Shepherd U in Division II in West Virginia that can be developed into something greater. And that has coincided with PJ Walker's struggles, both in preseason game action and some inconsistency during training camp. And so now, Studs, you've got a situation where even the coaches are talking about leaving this open for interpretation, trying to judge and figure out which way this all heads.
And I guess it's good to see that they've seen what we've seen, which is PJ Walker hasn't been good. And the other two quarterbacks on this roster have at times looked better than him. Now you're at House Hall on a daily basis and you're watching these more practices than me. So you would be better able to say who's been better in practices, but everyone I hear, whether it's yourself, Brad Biggs, or, our own Mark Grody, the score say PJ Walker's been consistently inconsistent throughout camp. And so for the coaches now, even Matt Eberflus just today, Thursday, saying that, the competition's open and that the competition in camp drove that, means that, maybe it's a combination of PJ Walker hasn't been good enough, and Nathan Peterman and Tyson Bagent in particular have made some noise, and so they have to give them serious looks. So it's now whether we'll get to it in a minute here about whether I think it would be malpractice or not to have Tyson Bagent as your number 2 quarterback entering the season, but I am very curious to see how this plays out now on Saturday, because it sounds like Saturday is going to have a lot of weight on who takes that job eventually.
Yeah, it will certainly factor in. It'll be part of the pie chart of the evaluation. I think with Walker, I think the coaching staff's trying to figure out what they should trust more, what they've seen with their eyes here in the last 6 weeks, or the 6 years of experience and some of the starts that he's made, and the ability to play successful, and the experience that he brings, and the knowledge of the NFL game at this level that can be very valuable in that role. Again, not only if you're needed to play, but as a resource to Justin as he goes through the week-to-week process and has someone to help him and lean on in that regard. And so that'll be interesting. And Bagent certainly, I think the thing that really struck me on Saturday that we talked about earlier in the week was not only just the way he went down the field on the touchdown drive, but it was just the calm, and it just seems very natural for him. He threw for 17,000 yards in college. He's played 53 games at Shepherd. So he's got experience, and he's got this library, and he's got this calm about him that's really valuable. And then he gets up in the post game afterwards and also seemed to meet that moment, which is not a huge deal, but it's not nothing either. It's just a guy who feels very comfortable in his own skin, very comfortable in his abilities, and he's trying to squeeze the most out of it at this time of year. Again, we got the chance to hear from Luke Getsy earlier in the week. Here is some of what he said. Obviously, again, Luke always grounded, always offers that perspective that keeps the helium from taking us away and floating away. Here's what Luke Getsy had to say.
Everybody has a shot, right? All three guys have done a really nice job through training camp. I think you guys have seen, like most of the guys in our training camp, there's been good days and bad days for everybody, those three specifically. So we're taking all that in. I know he had a great drive, and that's exciting for people. But that's one drive, so we're gonna make that part of the evaluation. But we're gonna take the whole training camp evaluation before we make a decision like that.
So yeah, I mean, like, look, they're gonna make this decision, and Luke was very clear to say, look, this is one drive in a preseason game in August, and it's really exciting for a lot of people, but we got to see a big picture, and a very, very clear big picture, and so they're gonna work through it. Look, like, roster cuts come next week early, and the final or the initial 53-man roster is due on Tuesday. That's one of the most compelling decisions on the roster, along with how many running backs you keep, and what does the wide receiver depth chart look like, and what are you doing at defensive end. Yeah, I mean, and so, let's get that game on Saturday at Soldier Field. Let's get a little bit more of a sample size to compare.
I will say, I did not expect us to be having a backup quarterback controversy when training camp started. It's nice to be able to talk about the backup quarterback, because there's so much that we've made of the backup quarterback in for the Chicago Bears over the last, I don't know how many years, just because of the way that the starting quarterback is played. And so the quote has always been, the favorite quarterback for fans in Chicago is the backup quarterback. And so it's great to talk about the backup quarterback and just who's going to be the backup quarterback, and not have people saying this guy should be the starting quarterback. That I think feels really good. But when it comes to how this all plays out, how I still feel about it is, and you touched on this, PJ Walker has actual NFL experience and has won actual NFL games, has thrown to DJ Moore, right?
Yep.
You can't say that for Tyson Bagent. And so to go into the idea of him winning the backup quarterback position, I think is still kind of, let me rephrase this. You can't go into the season with a rookie quarterback who has zero NFL experience as your backup quarterback to Justin Fields, who I think still needs that guy in his ear that has NFL experience, like a guy almost kind of what Chase Daniel was at one point for Mitchell Trubisky. And Chase Daniel was could do all the X's and O's. You get him on the field, it's I don't know about this. But I don't think you can go into the season with Bagent as your backup quarterback and feel good about that, because at that point you have to let PJ Walker go, because you're not keeping him.
Right.
You're not keeping three quarterbacks on the roster. And he's not going to sit here and be a third string quarterback. He can go find a backup job somewhere else. So I just don't, I see PJ Walker still being the backup quarterback when all's said and done, unless you feel like Nate, this is how I look at it. Let's just sum it all up. I look at the backup quarterback job right now as a battle between Nathan Peterman and PJ Walker. And then Tyson Bagent is a real candidate for the practice squad.
Correct.
I think that one of the other two will be the backup quarterback, and Tyson Bagent ideally ends up back in Chicago on the practice squad, assuming he clears waivers, which I feel like he probably would.
Right. In a nutshell, it's a riskier dice roll to go and do the regular season with an undrafted rookie out of Division II as your number 2 quarterback than it is to wait 24 hours and see if somebody happens to claim that guy, and then you can fit him on your practice squad and hopefully just continue with business as normal from there. And so we'll watch it. We'll watch it unfold early next week. We will figure out what that whole thing looks like, and hopefully it is a valuable exercise for this coaching staff to have this opportunity Saturday to watch them play against the Bills.
And here's the last thing I want to say on this, and I know you and David talked about this a little bit. The idea of Tyson Bagent clearing waivers. We had Mike Florio on the score earlier in the week, and he said that the noise he's seen about him has made him feel like he hasn't necessarily the noise he's heard about Bagent makes him feel like he wouldn't clear waivers, like someone would pick him up. And I heard that and I said, dude, are you serious? Like it's in as much as I know that he has a ton of experience, and I know that from what we've seen in the 2 preseason games, he's looked comfortable. And I really liked what he said post game, where Tyson Bagent said that the fact that he's played in, I think it was for 3 different offensive coordinators when he was in college, gave him a taste of what all different kinds of offenses are. And that makes it so that way what he's seen in Luke Getsy's offense is like vaguely familiar, and that's why he's able to pick it up. And you can tell he's a smart kid. So he's absolutely able to learn this stuff, and he just played a lot of football. But it's Division II football. He's been playing against 3rd and 4th stringers.
Right.
If a team wants to pick him up on waivers and make him your number 2 quarterback or put him on your 53-man roster, go for it.
No one's doing it to make him the number 2. No one in the world would do that.
Yeah.
But if somebody wanted to do it to make him the number 3, they could. Look, I lived through Tanner Gentry and Daniel Braverman mania when people thought that those guys would never make it to the practice squad because they had, good training camps and impressive preseasons. People forget that there's 31 other camps going on around the league, and that there are things happening in those camps that we have no idea about. And so to think that this is the center of the football universe and everybody is paying attention to every throw and everything that Tyson Bagent does is just a little bit off with what the reality is. Shifting gears back to Justin for a minute, because I know we did talk about the idea that that MVP conversation is amplified. It has gotten noisy. It has gotten legs. It has gotten, debate worthy at times. Well, Luke Getsy was asked this week, Studs, to kind of weigh in on what his thoughts are that he at least is working with a guy who has drawn enough attention to have these conversations mushroom up a little bit. And so he was asked about Fields. He was asked about the MVP conversation and kind of what he makes of all that here in the middle to end of August.
He's an exciting player, right? And he got to prove a little bit of that last year. And so, from our perspective, a preseason situation like that isn't very important. But if we're talking like this in December and January, then now we're probably exceeding expectations of people, right? But the most important thing for us is that Justin just continues to grow, and not just Justin, but everybody on this offense. We've got to continue to get better each and every day. And like I've always said in here, we have a certain play style that we want to play and we want everyone to feel. And we have to make sure that when it comes to September 10th, that we're making sure that that's the biggest priority for us.
So there it is again, the offensive coordinator keeping it on the ground floor. I think that the idea that if this conversation were to continue or to renew itself in December and January would be a wonderful thing for the city. It'd be certainly be a wonderful thing for this podcast. We'd have listeners coming from left and right, because it would mean that Justin is rolling. It would mean the Bears are playing successful football and certainly in the playoff hunt. And it would be a very positive development. But let's go one step at a time here. I think our buddy Brad Biggs in his mailbag this week took a question about this and went back over the last 10 years to see what the average victory total of the last 10 MVP quarterbacks was. And it's 13, Studs.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
that's a little bit incongruent with what the projections are for this Bears team and how many games that they're going to win, and so it starts there, I think, more than anything else. And then look, again, like to get to 4,000 passing yards, you first got to get to 3,000 passing yards. To get to 13 wins, you first got to get to 7 wins. Let's go. Let's get to each checkpoint before we start dreaming about the destination that's 3 or 4 stops down the road. I think that's certainly been the approach inside the building. I do think that from day one of the Matt Eberflus regime here, that the infrastructure around Justin has been supportive in the right ways, in keeping him keep the main thing. Like, let's focus on, as Luke said there, just making progress every single week. And then ultimately, when these conversations come into the picture, they'll have a little bit more merit. They'll have a little bit more meaning than just kind of the fluffy shouting match that it is for, shows like First Take to be able to do a full segment and then tweet it out on social media and see what kind of reactions they can get.
Right. So, and to go back to what you were saying at the beginning there, like, if Justin Fields is in the MVP conversation, that means that the Bears are on top of the division. They're winning 10, 11, 12, 13 games, and they're exceeding expectations across the entire team, not just Justin Fields. And I do like, I understand where that kind of MVP conversation comes from. If the Bears had been an above 500 team last year, Justin Fields would have been in those conversations because of what he was doing on the ground. He wouldn't have won it, but he would have been like in the conversations. People would have been mentioning his name as MVP type of player. But the team was horrible, and you don't have an MVP from a horrible team. And so, this year when we're talking about a team like the Bears that are in the, 6 to 9 win range, depending on how well things go and how healthy the team is, like even that is a successful. If the Bears win 7 games this year, that's 4 more games, and that means that Justin Fields probably made progress. Like
Look,
that,
Matt,
so.
Matt Nagy was laughed. I was just going to say, Matt Nagy was laughed out of town because he was praised for a couple of years internally as being able to keep things together during a 6-game losing streak, and then a 4-game losing streak, and then a 5-game losing streak. And we were like, well, enough with the losing streaks. Well, last year we got a 10-game losing streak from Matt Eberflus and the crew here, and they haven't broken it yet. Their last win was on Monday night in Foxborough, 10 months ago now. And so, it's crazy to think about where they need to go to just get back to the level where we can start talking about them getting to where we think they can go, and so it's it is a complicated discussion, and I think it is healthy, as much as a lot of people don't want to hear it, to just kind of stay in the now and understand what it looks like from here.
And I think that just ultimately, this isn't just for Justin Fields, it's the entire team. Like, expectations need to be grounded. I have heard people say, like, the Bears are going to win 10 games this year. And I tell, like, they won 3 games last year, guys. And I agree that the team is more talented across the board. And unless things are just catastrophic, especially the quarterback position, they should win more than 3 games. Especially if you even just look at, and I know this is random and year to year doesn't necessarily carry over, but they lost a lot of 1-score games last year. You assume that they're not going to lose, 6 or 7 1-score games again, right? So
you hope.
Yeah, you hope, right? That's if things are better. But the idea of 10+ wins, the idea of Justin Fields being MVP candidate, like that is sky high, and like we should just be surprised and glad that it happens, and not talk about it as something that we expect or is legitimate possibility at this moment in time.
Yeah, and we'll see where it goes. Look, like, again, September is right around the corner, and there is so much for us to learn about this team in those first 3 games, and then the 14 that follow, and it's going to be fun to get there. I know we'll have David back from Vegas soon. He'll be able to weigh in on a bunch of this stuff. We'll be able to get ourselves back on the, like we said, on that runway with the foot on the gas, and let's not turn back. So it should be fun here. Obviously, again, starting with Saturday's game against the Bills. Anything else you need to get off your chest before we break?
No, I think I'm good. We'll get David back from Vegas one way or another, and we'll see how things go on Saturday and cut down week next week. So we'll see what happens with the great Tyson Bagent.
All right. Yeah, we will see. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We will obviously have more Bears content in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Thanks for joining the Take the North podcast. That's Adam Studzinski. I'm Dan Wiederer. We will talk to you soon.